Hello, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting with a little bit of a walkthrough of the drag and drop project that we've been talking about in various articles. Remember, this started out as a discussion in one of our Ask Me Anything About Oracle Intelligent Advisor sessions. Don't forget to sign up for the next one. And here's how it started. I have an entity with a bunch of attributes. The attributes are not important for this. They're just there to give you some data to look at. I have two relationships. I have the containment, and then I have a reference relationship representing those instances that I've selected. And they are selected based on a flag called the entity is selected. And they become a member of this reference relationship if this has been marked as selected. Here in the user interface, I have a screen broken down basically into two parts. On the right-hand side, I have a container that contains a standard entity collect, and I will collect my entity instances in the normal way. On the right-hand side, it doesn't show up on this, but it is actually going to be on the right-hand side, we have an area which is just another container, which will be the droppable area. Then we have a bunch of code in, amongst other things, the labels, but also in the containers, and a few other pieces of code using custom properties, as I'm sure you've seen many times before. So that's the basic setup. Then we have a page at the end which shows you the result, hopefully which matches exactly what you did in the drag and drop. And then you can use the back button to go back and change your mind. You can refresh the page, and we should still have the instances that we've created. So now that we've got this, let's take a look at the code. This is very ugly, very hard and fast. Let's get this done. Let's make a demo. So let's just focus on the big picture, what we did here. There are essentially four pieces of code, but a couple of them are completely identical and would need to be encapsulated properly to stand as real code. The label is, as I often do, is used to do some basic setup. Okay, so the label itself just displays a message, but it is mostly used to set up the drop zone. We'll call it the drop zone. So it's used to create a table and a table body, and it's used to add that to the drop zone. And that is where we will push our dropped items. Then we have the jQuery UI droppable widget. So we explain what's going to happen when somebody drops something on our drop zone. We're going to make sure that if they drop something, it is not something that they've already dropped. Then we're going to take a clone of whatever it is they're dragging, which in our case will be an instance, and we'll drop it into the thing on the right-hand side. We'll change the color, we'll change some attributes, we'll make everything disabled so they can't change any of the data, and we'll update the instance to say that it's been selected. And finally, we'll borrow the little button at the end of the row, so that if they click the button at the end of the row in the droppable zone, they will unselect the item as well as removing the item from the right-hand side. So this is all about dropping. Now what about dragging? We're going to say that you can only drag stuff if it hasn't already been dragged. And if it's been already dragged, it should be reverted. It should be rejected. The helper is the idea that when you move the mouse during the drag and drop, you should see something. And you should see a clone of the thing that you're dragging. We also do that in the update. We do a little bit of code to make sure that if the user adds new instances on the left-hand side, we make sure that those new instances become draggable, which is why we have the same piece of code again in the update. So each time an update fires, we make sure that any new rows become draggable. Then we have an onRemove instance. This one's pretty obvious. If you delete an instance from the left-hand side, we should also remove the item from the right-hand side. The onNavigated means that if you use the back button, we have to be able to rebuild the list of things that you selected so we can display them and you can edit them. So we check to see if there are existing rows in the entity, and we check to see if any of them are selected, and if they are, we will rebuild using exactly the same code. We'll rebuild the right-hand side. And the same is true also for the footer, because the footer will allow us to catch the scenario where someone presses the refresh button and we need to rebuild the list of selected and dragged and dropped rows. So let's see what gives now when we run the debugger. You'll probably need to zoom out a bit and maybe even readjust the borders here. I'll zoom out a bit. There we go. And we can see our two containers, left and right. On the left-hand side, we have the standard entity collect, and I'm going to go ahead now and enter a couple of entity instances. And in a moment, I'm going to drag them into the right-hand side. And when I drag them into the right-hand side, if they've not already been dragged, they will be draggable. And when I drop them, they will be counted as being selected. So let's go ahead now and drag one of these to prove my point just before we start. So I've got 4 instances, none of which are marked as selected. They are all selected set to false. So now draggable, I can drag a row and drop it into the drop zone. I clone the row that was dragged, and you can see that I set the Boolean to true. All the others are still set to false. So now I have a selected row. I'm going to add another one. So each time I drag and drop, I get a clone unless I've already done it once. I can only do it once because once it's been selected, you can't drop it again. If I click this button, the custom code will remove the item from the right-hand side and will reset the flag to say that it is no longer selected. So the only one that's selected now is number 3. If I try and drag number 4 becomes selected. And if I try and edit anything, all that data on the right-hand side is disabled. When I click this button, I will unselect the row and I will remove it from the right-hand side. So let's go forward. That's a confirmation now that I can see the rows that were selected and their current status, just to confirm what I've done. If I go back, I'm using the onNavigated code, which will rebuild the right-hand side to show me the red selected items. And if I refresh the page, for example, using the debugger or using my browser, there we go, the custom footer will rebuild the list of selected rows as well. So I have a mechanism now for displaying all of that and managing most of the scenarios. So this is our little drag and drop demo. I hope you enjoyed it. You can pick up the zip file at the bottom of the article. Take care. See you soon on one of our Ask Me Anywhere sessions. Bye-bye.